Welcome. My name's Javan. I'm an organizer with Service Employees International Union, Florida Public Services Union, and this is our Get to Know the Candidate series. SEIU, FPSU members have a long history here in the city of St. Pete, going all the way back to the 1960s. Today, we represent workers for the city of St. Pete, employees at Pinellas County School District and Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, the adjunct faculty at St. Pete College, and many others who are all the beating heart of the community. They help get our kids to school safely each and every day. They keep the city running from the IT department to Parks and Recreation, and they help to educate the next generation. The St. Pete municipal elections will be held on November the 2nd, and as of the recording of this video, the only ways to vote are with your mail-in ballot or on election day in person at your regular polling place. If you want to check on the status of your mail-in ballot or request that mail-in ballot to come to you or find out the status of your registration or your polling place, go to votepinellas.com. We're proud to have endorsed Lisset Hanewicz for St. Pete City Council District 4. Lisset is a full-time homemaker and also a civic leader, and has been dedicated to rebuilding the neighborhood association and being actively engaged in the St. Pete community. Lisset, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
So your story is very powerful. Many families in our community are facing challenges right now and finding ways to come together to meet those challenges. And that's something that you know very personally. Take me back to that moment when, as a teenager, when it was clear to you that the best way you could help your family was to go into the workforce and to not continue your high school education.
Yeah, so you know, my parents came from Cuba in the late 60s, and my mom and my dad got divorced when I was 2 years old. And my mom raised me on her own with the help of my grandmother in Miami. And I remember all the struggles that my mom had growing up and my grandmother helping her. My grandmother, at one point when I was a teenager, had the opportunity, she had applied, I think, for Section 8 housing. She was retired, and an opportunity came for her to get her housing. And we had that challenge. And, you know, I told my mom not to worry. I could finish school at night. And I did. I got my high school diploma at night. I started working full time during the day. And I helped my mom at the age of 16. I was paying half the rent, half the utilities, half the food. And I remember not just working during the day, but going to school at night, but I also worked on weekends at Domino's Pizza, answering the phone. And there were times I was juggling 2 jobs and going to school. But it's something that I knew that I had to continue my education. And work was the challenge I had, but you know, I had no other choice. I mean, it's something that I had to do. I had to help out my mom, and I still had to continue getting my education. So it was clear to me what my choices were. I didn't have any other choice.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of hard work and tenacity that you come by. Is there anybody in your life that inspired that kind of dedication and commitment to I guess doing the hard things?
I would say, and I'll say this because my mom just passed last Monday, but I would say my mom and my grandmother, my family. Seeing people come, and I think it's the immigrant story, not just my family, but anybody who sometimes has to leave where they leave for whatever reasons and come with nothing, may not speak the language, and will do whatever it takes for their children to have the opportunities they did not have. I never took that for granted. My mom didn't have the education that I got, but she wanted me to have the opportunity of getting education. And if it took cleaning floors, if it took selling donuts, whatever it was, which she did all sorts of things to make ends meet, she did that. So her daughter could have the opportunities that she did not. And she was also from a generation of women who, weren't used to being divorced.
Mhm.
And it was, so you had the layer of being an immigrant, then the divorce. And those are challenges that she wanted to make sure that I didn't have to face, that knowing that her daughter could have an education, no matter if she was married or not married, that I would be able to provide for myself. And if I had a child or not, whatever my life would be, I would be
Mhm.
prepared. And I owe that to my mother.
Mhm. And you kind of just kept on moving. Many people
Yep.
have those challenges, and sometimes they can be too much to overcome. But you found a way to continue on to get to going to high school at night, to going to college, and eventually law school.
Yep.
How did you come to that decision that going into the law was something that spoke to you?
So even when I was a teenager, I had thought of being an attorney. Maybe it's because I argued too much. I'm not sure why, but the irony is I started working with attorneys when I was 17 years old. I started as a receptionist because I figured, what's the best way to know if this is what I want to do? Then start working in a law firm. I started as a receptionist. I worked my way to legal secretary, eventually paralegal. I've worked in everything from small single practitioner office, to mid-sized firm, to in-house at a bank, and to eventually going to law school. And during that process, like most students, I changed my mind. It took me probably about 7 or 8 years to get my bachelor's. And there were times where I could take 1 or 2 classes or 3 classes, but I never gave up because I knew I had to get my degree. And I tried to also, even as a teenager, have fun and go out and do the things in life, even married, get divorced, all these things while still getting an education. And after I got my bachelor's, I decided to get my MBA, and it was 2 years full time while working full time. I did all my credits 2 years, and I think it was like Monday through Thursday. I go to school till 10 o'clock at night. And while I was in the MBA program, it sealed the deal for me in terms of going to law school, because I realized at that point in my life that I never wanted to look back and question why I didn't go to law school. And the reason the decision was such an issue for me personally is because when I lived in Miami at the time, there was no public university. There was University of Miami and private schools. So that means over $100,000 in student loans. And my only options at that point in my life were going to a state school. And at that point, it was UF or Florida State University. And those are the schools I applied. So that would mean me leaving my job, leaving my life, selling my home, everything, and picking up and going. And that's what I did at the age of 30. Because I wanted to make sure I never questioned what if, what if I had gone to law school? And it was the best decision I made in my life. It was scary. It was scary, especially for someone who had a stable job, had stable housing. And look, my mom rented her whole life. I had bought my house when I think I was 21 or 22. I can't remember how old. And I had to use it was a townhouse. And I had to save up all the money and get an advance from my employer to put the down payment. Cause, I knew that was my road to not living month by month like my mom lived. So I gave all that up for my education and going to law school. And sometimes you have to take those leaps of faith, and that leap of faith worked for me.
And that is such an amazing journey, and that's only part of the story. After going to law school, you practice law as a federal prosecutor, as well as in private practice. And during the course of that, you ended up relocating to St. Pete, and it was just something about the community itself that spoke to you as to where you wanted, because you were looking in Tampa and a few other places. But what is it that you found in St. Pete that was just like, this is it for me?
Well, So St. Pete's special for many reasons, but one of the things that I noticed, and the first time we went out in downtown, it had this cool vibe. And it wasn't pretentious. It felt very welcoming. And there was also an artsy vibe about it, which I liked. And I love parks and I love green space, and St. Pete has a lot of that, which we are very fortunate to have. So that's what kind of really pulled me into St. Pete. I felt welcome from the beginning. And let me tell you, it wasn't just me, it was me and my husband. And for those of you that are married out there, finding a couple that can agree on where to live can be a mission in itself. And look, this was back in 2006, and here we are in 2021. And we love St. Pete and we love it more every day. And back then we didn't know many people here, and we've built a community of, we didn't have family, and our communities are family. It's amazing how people in our community really help each other. And that's something that I don't know if you can find in many places.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like it's not just something you found, but something you really built as a full-time homemaker and civic leader. You started just by getting involved in your neighborhood association, which really needed to be revitalized at the time you came into it. Was that just something you decided to do kind of on a whim, or were you looking specifically for a way to get involved in the neighborhood and found yourself there? How did you come to the neighborhood association?
So when we first moved into the neighborhood, I was a prosecutor at the time working at the state here. And, you know, as an attorney doing trials, I didn't have much time to get involved in the community. And by the way, I tell this to people all the time. If you can't get involved in the community because you don't have the time, there are other ways to get involved. You just have to find those ways. Because it's always an issue of, do you have the time or not the time, and what can you do? And at that point in time, I couldn't. But what I did is I joined the neighborhood association. I gave them my membership dues so that can support whatever they were doing. And then through time, like everything else that involves people who volunteer, there's sometimes a group of people that keep it going and it just dies out. And it died out in our neighborhood. And I have to say, by the way, the city of St. Pete and not many cities do have extremely active neighborhood associations. We have a lot of active neighborhood associations, and this started back in the late 1980s with the, I think they got a grant, the Great Neighborhood Partnership Grant, to kind of get these neighborhoods going. But so when I had my daughter, I had a high-risk pregnancy. And I got pregnant. We made the decision I'd stay home. I knew that I wanted to rebuild our neighborhood association. So I did that. I did it from the ground up. We had 0 membership. Right now we have probably over 25 to 27% of the neighborhood that are active members, which is unreal for anyone who is involved in any of these types of organizations, to have that many people that are involved. And there's about 500 and something households in our neighborhood. And so I saw that, and I did everything from get a board of directors to rewrite the bylaws to make us a 501c3. And that's where I saw my legal skills helping our neighborhood. And then came my interaction with the city and how we could be a voice in what affects us. And be active, whether it be transportation issues like complete streets. People had complained about safety on MLK right by our neighborhood since I got here. And when we had the opportunity for bike lanes and try to find ways to make it safer, I let my community know this is it. Because guess what? 20 years, it's going to be another 20 years that the city's not going to touch this road. So if you want to address safety, this is the time to do it. And we had those conversations and our voices were heard. And I think that's where I started seeing how we can impact it. And by the way, when the city first came to our meeting, the neighborhood leaders thought, oh, they just want us to rubber stamp this. They're not really going to pay attention to us. And it was shocking because they actually did listen, went back to the drawing board and started incorporating what, the ideas of and the feedback that they got. And I thought that was really amazing. I also helped our neighborhood. I got local landmark. We have a historic baseball field here, Huggins Stengel Field. So I wrote I'm not a baseball, I don't know much about baseball, but I do know how to read and research and write. And so I researched a lot and did the local landmark application, went before the city. So I hadn't just gone before city council on open forum just to be a voice on an issue, but I've actually been actively involved in making something happen. And I was able to get the local landmark designation for the baseball field. I also got it on the National Register of Historic Places. And why that's important is because it's part of our identity as a neighborhood, and it brought the neighborhood in celebration on something together. And I think that that's what makes people love living in an area where they live is those opportunities. So being an attorney, I saw that I can help our community. I also was pulled into trying to help our zoned elementary school, Woodlawn Elementary. And we got mentors in the Woodlawn Elementary. We also got a learning garden established. One of our board members is a master gardener, and we worked together and with other neighborhood groups and got that done. So seeing that I can have an impact is something that really is kind of what led me to make a decision about city council. I would have never imagined otherwise, because I never thought about politics or entering politics.
Well, so much of that is what I like to call the texture of the community. When we go into an area, you know, there are houses on every block. There are, you know, grocery stores and restaurants, but it's really when those things are authentic and unique to the place, when, you know, it's not just a park with a park and a baseball field. It's a baseball field that does have that historic designation, and it starts to become a gathering place. It's when, you know, the neighborhood association isn't just people sitting around complaining about things that may be happening, but it is a place that has a great two-way relationship where their needs are being addressed by the city, and the city is coming to them to hear out and find out how they can really best serve the people who call the city home. And you've been intimately involved in making a lot of those changes for the better. Equity is one of is a very important topic that has come into focus for the city of St. Pete right now. There's 2 ballot amendments that are looking to address equity and really, you know, cementing that in the city charter itself. But equity and inclusion is something that you've taken on in the work that you've done with in your civic engagement in the neighborhood association, as well as in the school you were just talking about, and making sure that the needs of all the students are being met. Where does that come from for you, of having that sense of the importance of equity?
Look, I came from a very poor background. I came from a mom who obviously did not speak English. When I go to any school here, I see myself in many of those kids. It's something, you know, it's funny, someone will see you where you are in life, but they forget where you come from. And, you know, I know the importance of education. Education for me was what got me to where I am, and it made a huge difference in my life. And I'm not saying you have to become an attorney. I mean, but it impacts whatever you do. And I think it is important. Our schools are extremely important. I think they've been under attack for a long time. I will tell you, it's disheartening for me to find out, you know, where our school is, our zoned elementary school, right, not far from us, in terms of where they are compared to other elementary schools throughout the state of Florida, which I don't think it should be where it is. And that's not the fault of the kids. You know, that's the schools, not, you know, that's the fault of leaders, you know, they're not giving those children the same opportunities that other kids may be getting. So, you know, getting involved with the school was a very natural thing for me, because I think that more and more we've separated schools from the community. And I think it is important for the community and the schools to be part of each other, you know, to not be in silos, which is, I think, what happens. We have so many people in our neighborhoods that are retired, that have the time, that have the knowledge, that can give back to a school, whether it's mentoring, whether it's maybe in an after school program. There should be more of that because we're all in this together. And so if we have an opportunity to do that, then let's do it. So that is something that, we try to do with our Friends of Woodlawn movement, is try to get people involved in the community, to bring that community back to the school. The other thing, in terms of equity that I saw in neighborhood associations, being part of Crescent Lake Neighborhood Association, they also have a council of neighborhood associations. And I was on the board. They asked me to be on the board as a membership chair. And I will tell you, when I first went to the Council of Neighborhood Associations, and there wasn't a lot of diversity. Because I think it's more common sometimes in certain areas for have neighborhood associations, and sometimes not in others. Sometimes younger people don't get involved in neighborhood associations. You find more retirees. I mean, there are so many reasons. But I didn't see that diversity. And one of the things, when there were the protests and we were having a meeting, and somebody's like, well, what can we do? And someone's like, they didn't even know how to get involved. I'm like, we have to do something. At a minimum, we have to do something. Like, what can we do? And so at that point, I felt compelled to start the Diversity Inclusion Committee, so we can start having those discussions within Kona. And I also drafted a resolution that was passed by the board, but I also provided it for other neighborhood associations. So, and what that is, and I know everybody says, oh, it's a piece of paper, but no, what that actually made us do is intentionally think about diversity and inclusion, and how can we make sure that our board, even in our neighborhood association, is reflective of our community, right? And look, we had that discussion in our neighborhood. And by the way, our neighborhood association board was diverse in terms of race and ethnicity. Look, I'm Hispanic. One of our board members is Black, and we don't, and we may be one of the minority. I mean, there's not a lot of Hispanics in my neighborhood, but you know what we didn't have? Men. They're all women. And so we then had to become intentional. Well, we need to make sure that we have men, and if we need people from the LGBTQ community, and make sure that not only we have that discussion and let our neighborhood know, look, we are looking for people from all backgrounds. So we are diverse. And I think that's important, because then you start thinking about different ways in terms of engaging the community, right? And different people engage in different ways. Parents may want to do certain events, and people who are single may want to do certain types of events, and may have other sort of things that they want the neighborhood to focus on. So I think that was very important. So to me, it's a conversation you have to continuously have, to make sure that you're as inclusive as you can be.
And that inclusion is an issue that's also being discussed in the context of housing right now. Housing is probably one of the most important issues or biggest challenges being faced by people all over the city of St. Pete, as the cost of both buying and renting continues to go higher and higher. How do you see that as that's an issue that is going to come before City Council? There's been a lot of conversation around investing ARP funding into addressing the housing crisis. How do you see the housing issue as being fundamental to the work that City Council has before it?
I mean, it's huge. And we saw, by the way, this is not something that happened overnight. In a neighborhood, we saw this happening years ago, because in our neighborhood, and it happened in many neighborhoods, you started seeing the older houses being torn down, being replaced by the much bigger houses. And I still remember there was one house that was torn down in our neighborhood, and they built the houses, and they were like over 700, 800,000. And everybody in the neighborhood was like, what? It's shocked. And now people can't even buy in it's crazy. And those small houses were starter homes for people. And I do believe, and we live in an older neighborhood, and you do have to have a variety of stock, no matter what part in life you are, whether you're starting from college, you know, whether you're single, and then, you're starting in a relationship, then you have kids or retired. A city has to have a place for everyone. And, right now it's just the barriers have been insane, whether it's the issue of high demand and low supply, whether the issue is the cost rising faster than income, because it's something else that's going on, the costs associated with construction and land. All these things have come together, and it's not just a crisis for us, it's a crisis for everyone in the nation. So, besides needing the support, and I do believe the city has to do their part, but this is not just city money, it's county money, it's state money, it's federal money. It's a huge issue. And I don't think there's just one simple answer, but I do think that we as a city can definitely start by making sure we have a variety of housing. And I know we're going to be changing our zoning. That's going to be a huge discussion in our city. I do believe that we need to, and something that should be easy, and I say this now, and who knows how it's going to turn out, but accessory dwelling units, throughout the city, that's something that should be easy. And these are like mother-in-law apartments and little apartments that you can have, which I think provide housing for lots of different people in lots of different stages in their life. And not only provide this housing that could be cheaper, especially if you have more of it everywhere, right? But it also helps the homeowner, because that can offset their cost of a mortgage. So it helps people at different levels. And this type of housing could be a 1-bedroom. It could be a little efficiency. It could be a little 2-bedroom. So that is something I think that could be done. The other thing I think that we definitely are going to be seeing is an increase in our zoning in terms of upzoning in quarters, because I think affordability is also tied to transportation, which, by the way, we have a huge issue with transportation. And I remember when I was a little girl, where we lived, my grandmother took the bus. And we had to be close to the bus. That's just the way, or, a supermarket, just because you're walking to it. And so it is tied to housing. So we have to be very intentional, make sure that we provide the housing that's necessary close to the corridors where people can get to transportation. If they have a car, they choose to not have a car, can't have a car. They should have transportation options. Which, by the way, is tied to complete streets. If they walk or bike, it should be safe also. So those all things I think are tied together. And what this does is, if you change the zoning where you can allow more duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, and by the way, in neighborhoods, depending on how it's done, it's going to fit with the character of the neighborhood, because I think that's the pushback you get a lot of times. And that's going to be a big discussion. But being a neighborhood president, I will tell you, in our neighborhood, we have accessory dwelling units. We have quadruplexes that you would think is a house, but it's a quadruplex, and duplexes, and we have apartments, and we have townhouses, and all these different types of living arrangements that help. So we definitely need to increase that. I know that with the redevelopment of Tropicana Field, that's going to be an opportunity to bring some affordable housing. The CBA that was passed, the Community Benefits Agreement, I think is important in making sure that when there are those big developments and huge influx of government money going in, that we get something back for our taxpayer dollars. There are barriers that have been placed by the state on things that the city can do and how much you can push certain things. And like impact fees, the city tried to do that to help with affordable housing, and then the state kind of like did away with that. But now you have the American Rescue Plan, which has been clear that people think affordable housing is the number one issue that it should go to. And I think the city right now, and by the way, those funds have to be, I believe, used by 2024. So it's a short window of making sure not just using that money for where it's needed the most, and addressing the needs that the community needs, but finding ways, you have to find a way to make sure it's used with whatever requirements that are in place, because there's always requirements done by the federal government with whatever requirements. But I do believe affordable housing has to be the majority of the money needs to go to affordable housing. And not only do we need to find ways to address what's happening now, but find ways to make sure that our community and the people of our city are going to have longer term effects from that influx of money coming in to address whether it's, workforce training, education, whatever it is, to make sure that we can continue the benefits of that influx of federal money coming into the city.
And your background as an attorney gives you a great toolkit to understand, one, just how to, break down these kind of complex issues, how they can and should be implemented. One of the common things that happens anytime there's an ordinance or a program that's being considered by the city is it does look at the language and making sure that that program fits in and is compliant with all applicable state, local, and federal laws, as the saying goes. But kind of more importantly, of being able to have that conversation with people to create a consensus and come together. How do you see yourself being able to work collaboratively with other city council members, whoever the next mayor will be, and the other stakeholders in the city?
Yeah. So it's funny because, attorneys, people have a certain feeling about attorneys. A lot of people don't like attorneys, except when they need one. But the thing that's great about attorneys is that they're used to seeing both sides of an issue most of the time and understanding how to look at an issue from different ways. And I think that's really important when you're on city council, because you are one of 8 people on city council, and you're going to have different opinions. And you also have to have the ability of getting to consensus on an issue, of identifying issues in a problem and working through that. And I think as an attorney, what law school gives you is that ability to do that, to think through those issues. And thinking like an attorney is something that is pretty much taught in law school. That's the whole purpose. You don't realize when you're in law school, it's like, no, they actually train you to think differently. And when an issue is presented, you start thinking about, we live in a great world, attorneys live in a great world. So you start thinking, well, what about this and this and this? And for anyone that's involved in any law or making any law, you have to think that way, because you have to think about the problems that could come about and how do you make it stronger? And how do you make it withstand a challenge? And all these different things that are involved, because once you start drafting something, there are other things that could be affected. There could be constitutional rights. There are many things that go into policy making. And I think being an attorney helps, I think will help city council with that conversation. And by the way, we always rely on city attorneys. City council members would rely on city attorneys for advice, but having a city council member that's an attorney can also help in that conversation, because now you have someone on city council who's bringing up issues, looking at from as a city council member versus an attorney. And they can look at the policy and think of, well, what can we do about this? And is there another way we can find a solution to something, as opposed to just here's the black letter law without giving that guidance. And I think you can, as an attorney, you can guide the conversation to address certain policy issues that are going to be before city council.
Coming back to District 4, what would you say is the biggest challenge or that is facing the district right now?
Well, I think generally you have the infrastructure issue for the city. I think what I think is going to be a challenge, and I've mentioned this in our conversation with the zoning. I think the zoning issue, in terms of making the changes that are going to happen through Vision 2050, which is you have neighborhoods, and most people are like, hold on, you're changing the zoning, you're going to allow duplexes or triplexes, or and there are areas where there are more single family homes, and how you implement that. I think that's going to be a huge discussion. And I think my background being part of a neighborhood is going to help that discussion, because I've had to have had those discussions with my neighborhood. So I understand, you get into the YIMBY NIMBY thing. Yes, in my backyard, no, in my backyard. I don't like to start a conversation that way, because as soon as you call somebody a name, that shuts people down. If I tell you, oh, you're a NIMBY or you're a YIMBY or whatever it is, you're not having a conversation about what the issue is. What is the fear? Is it parking? Is it density? What is it? And how can we get to a solution? Because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing. And so that, I think, is going to be a big challenge in terms of implementing it. But I am confident that we're going to get there. We're going to get there because affordable housing, everybody realizes how important that issue is for everyone in our community.
And if there was anything in particular that you would want to achieve outside of the challenges that need to be addressed, whether that's in your district or just to bring to the city of St. Pete, because now these races are going citywide, what would you like to have, what would you like to achieve with your time on city council?
In terms of my time in city council, I will tell you this: I never went in with a specific agenda except to serve our city. I mean, I never imagined running for office. And what I've been doing for my community since I started was to find solutions and make our city a better place. And if I could do that for everyone in the city, I would be thrilled. If I can move our conversations and do anything positive, whether it's on affordable housing, whether it's in infrastructure, to provide, because the way I see city council members is they're supposed to provide their community, their expertise, their guidance, and their help in tackling these issues, okay? And these are very difficult issues. And if I can do that and move the conversation to make our city better, to improve the outcomes for everyone in our city, then I'd be thrilled. I will tell you, I would be the first Hispanic person on city council, and just giving a part of our community a voice that they've never had on city council, I think also is going to be great, because even through my campaign trail, I've had people reach out and it's like, oh, there's other Hispanics here, because it's not like, we're a little bit, they're more dispersed. And not just that, even children of immigrants, when they hear my story, that they can relate to the same things that I may have gone through, or people that, were raised by a single parent, and see the challenges I've had in your life. I think there are things that are very relatable, that I've experienced that other people see, and I would hope that gives them hope, and I would hope it shows them the value of serving our city, the public service, how important it is. No matter where you're from, you can do it, and I would think that brings something positive to the days at city council.
Outstanding. Lisset, I want to say thank you for joining us. I also want to remind our viewers one last time that election day is Tuesday, November the 2nd. You have to vote in person at your polling place or vote by mail if you have your mail-in ballot. And please make sure that you also vote for our other endorsed candidates: Ken Welch for mayor, Copley Gertis for District 1, and Richie Floyd for District 8.
Thank you, Javan, so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for everything you do.